A new live-action Predator movie's on the way later this year, but first up we've got a straight-to-streaming animated film which gives us a chance to see the iconic creature go up against a Viking, a samurai, and a World War II pilot. Join us as we discuss Predator, Killer of Killers. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast, and we have a new release to talk about this week. We are looking at the new animated spin-off film for the Predator franchise, which went straight to Hulu. This is Predator Killer of Killers, which is co-directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who did Prey, is directed the upcoming Predator Badlands, which is the next big theater release that's coming out later this year. This was kind of like it's kind of like when like a video game announces like a new like game in a series, but they're like, hey, and we also have this like side game or this remastered version of an old game to go with that you'll get a bit sooner. That's what this felt like. It was like, hey, big new movie later this year, but here's something you get a little bit quicker.
I hesitate to say it's the mobile puzzle game equivalent, because it does feel higher quality than that sort of thing. But you're right, it does feel like it's a separate little offshoot where it's like, you don't need to watch this. It doesn't, at least I don't think it's going to be majorly important, but it is something they're just kind of expanding lore a little bit.
Well, there's actually something at the very end that I think is going to be important. Not that I think you'd need to have watched this to understand the eventual thing that might come from it, but that's obviously all spoiler talk, because we are going to start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers, and if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And of course you can support the content and keep it all coming with Patreon and get some bonus shows, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So I obviously love Predator. I even kind of love Predator 2, which I know is not as popular amongst people with, opinions. But
yes,
and Prey is very good. I think Predators is really mediocre, and The Predator is pretty shit. I don't think you've watched Predators or The Predator yet, have you?
I can neither confirm nor deny when it comes down to homework, but no.
I was going to say, actually, there's a good chance you might have watched one of them for homework on this episode.
I will not spoil anything, but going into watching this movie, no, I have not.
Okay. All right, so David will give his opinion on Predators at the end of the episode then.
You know nothing. You have no idea.
I know all, you son of a bitch. I know all. But yeah, so I went into this as a Predator fan, but I'm also someone who, if I'm honest, like extended stuff, and by extended stuff I mean like tie-in animated movies, tie-in comic books, tie-in novels, tie-in video games. I would say 9 times out of 10, I mostly just kind of sigh and go, I can't really be bothered with like extended stuff that's not in the original medium of what it was. And
right.
So I was kind of like, I went in with an open mind, and I'm hoping I'm going to like this, but a part of me was thinking I might just kind of feel like, okay, this is fine for what it is, but it's always just going to feel like a separate side thing.
Let me stop you there though. When you say in a different medium, are you specifically just talking about how it's animated while the originals were not? Because it is still a film, it is still a movie.
That is true, it's still a movie, but I would say that animated and live action to me are like, obviously there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of there are definitely both types of film. I do think there is enough of a difference for me that I kind of consider them different art forms to an extent. Obviously, in the same way that like there's still visuals in a comic book, but I consider comic books different to an animated film, which I then consider a bit different to a live action film. So there is a difference to me, and it's not even necessarily saying that it's lesser. I tend to not get into as much animation myself, but I'm not saying it's lesser because it's animation. Just that I tend not to be as attracted to it.
No, there's different things you can do between animation and live action. If you're not attracted to the things that animation tends to do more than live action, then that's reasonable enough. I don't think that's controversial.
So all this is to say is that I went in kind of like, not just like unbelievably hyped because I like Predator, right? And because there's reasons to be hyped with the people involved. There was still part of me, just based on how I feel about this type of thing, where I was kind of like, you know, I'm hoping for the best, but like I'm not like to me the main event's the movie we're getting later this year. Is, you know, that's the next that's Predator 6, effectively, and then this is, you know, an interesting little thing. Maybe it'll be it good or whatever, but. So I went in with some apprehension, I suppose, is what I'm ultimately trying to say. I mean, how did you feel going into this?
I mean, I kind of agree in that same sort of vein, as it does feel like a bit more of a spin-off side thing. I think as you watch the movie, you get that feeling even more so. But I do, in my mind, with what I know of Predator, which is, of course, without 2 movies in the lineage being watched, Predator has always been...
Let me just make it clear. You're not missing anything important from the 2 you've not seen.
Yeah, I didn't think I was. But yeah, with what I know about the Predator series, it is a bit more of a... I kind of want to say, like, almost an anthology series within its own right. While, yes, there is the... You know, there's the standard things that you get out of a Predator movie. We're never following, as far as I'm aware, the same Predator. We're never following the same people dealing with the Predator. It's always this different batch coming up. So you always get this different situation. So when we get this in, it is something that is different. It is something that is set up in a different way. It doesn't feel like it's too far removed from the main series because, again, it has always been this stuff where we're always following different people the whole way through.
It's why when people call Prey a prequel, I'm like, nah, not really, because the whole franchise is like just jumping around to different times the Predators show up. It's not like, yes, it's set before in the same world, but like, you know, I mean, I guess to the letter of the law, I guess technically it is, but I can't really consider it a prequel in the traditional sense, because like very little of it, other than 1 or 2 minor Easter eggs, there's nothing connective to the other films other than there is a predator from this species that comes from whatever planet they come from. And
right.
That's kind of it. And, you know, having like an animated film, which, you know, the premise was always pitched as it's somewhat of an anthology with like different predators in different eras. And that, you know, that's what it is. You get like 3 different characters in different time periods who have an interaction with a predator. And that's not that different from just the movies where it's different people having different interactions with the predator in different forms. So, like, it still fits into what the idea of the franchise is, for sure. It's just, you know, which, you know, I'm very carefully not saying what I actually feel about the movie itself. I'm saving that for the moment where I actually say that, because suspense, everyone. You got to build up a bit of suspense, even in your podcasts.
Yeah. Build up that watch time. I mean, suspense. Totally.
Both are important. Both are valid. So yeah. I mean, the summary here is basically you get a Viking Predator story, you get a samurai Predator story, and you get like a World War II pilot kind of Predator story, and that's your sales pitch. So
yeah, and there is a framing device to the whole thing as well.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, David, what did you think of Predator Killer of Killers?
In the binary / sliding scale, I liked it. I think it is great at the fight scenes. Again, it's that sort of idea of what animation can do that live action can't, is that it can make these fight scenes a bit more over the top and fantastical and showing off a bit more than the live action can, and it still feels genuine while still being exciting. So I think that's most of the movie right there, is just these fight scenes, which are done in highly creative ways. They make me care more about the characters and telling a story throughout that. So through that lens, I think it's great. Character-wise, I also enjoyed all the characters. I think despite being an anthology story, they did a good job of giving each of the characters a setup and payoff to their own arcs independently. So I like the way that they handled that as well. Where my criticism kind of begins and ends is more of from a meta-narrative perspective, where the existence of this movie, I'm kind of a bit disappointed, because it feels like this is pretty much saying that we aren't ever going to get a Viking full Predator movie. We're only going to get this 30-minute segment. We're never going to get a samurai one or a World War II one. Like, it is always just going to be a 30-minute segment, give or take on time, and that's what we're going to get out of it. So I'm a little bit disappointed there. And then for the animation style, I think, again, it does a good job of it, but I am starting to get a little bit worried, and this is kind of more emblematic of the entire system rather than just this movie individually. But when Spider-Verse came out, obviously that had a very different art style, and it kind of shook things up in animation, where there's this idea that you don't have to do everything the same way that Disney did. You can do it in different styles. I'm starting to worry that people are not learning the lesson of you can do different things, and they're more so learning the lesson of you can do what Spider-Verse did as well. Because this has a very similar sort of animation style to like Spider-Verse. It has a bit choppier of a frame rate. It has a bit more of like a painterly style is the best way I could really describe it. It's good. It works for what it is, but I do just kind of wish that going into this would be something wholly unique, something that could be called like its own Predator sort of style. But it's not bad. It's just I was hoping for a little bit different. So all in all, on the positive, just with very minor nitpicks here from a meta standpoint, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about the animation is that I agree the framiness is very Spider-Verse. I don't think it looks like Spider-Verse otherwise, though, which is actually what I would say fails it a little bit. Not that I want it to look like Spider-Verse, but more so that I think this framiness bothered me way more with how this looks. Like early on, I was actually feeling a little bit, I don't know, like it was making my eyes get a little bit sleepy, like paying attention to this movie. Because the framiness of like what the half frame speed or whatever it is they're using was actually making my eyes strain a little bit, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like putting me in the wrong foot to start with. That said, though, I do think that the movie is actually pretty good. For all the caveats and like pretenses I was throwing out in the build up, I actually found myself kind of into it the more it went along. I think that the stories kind of get better as they go. I was, I mean, I liked the first one well enough, but I was kind of detached from it. I think the second story drew me in a lot more and had some, like, I think the characters were better in the second story, and I think the third one kind of kept that up, at least kind of up to the same standard. So, and then by the time you get to kind of like, what they do with the end of the movie, I thought it did some interesting things. I think for me, the weird point that you had though, well, your point wasn't weird, but my weird feeling on it is the idea that in animation you can do more fantastical things with the action, but in a weird way that actually bothers me. It's one of the things that I don't like about animation, is that I don't like, especially when it's something that's connected to an otherwise live action franchise, is that I hate, like, here's a good example I'll give you. And this is not even an anime, this is a comic book. But I remember when the season 8 of Buffy, like, comic book was coming out, right? And I read some issues of that, and there was like, immediately they were doing things that they could never have done in the TV show because like the budget to do them would be insane in a live action form. And it immediately took me out of it, and it made me feel like it felt wrong, because this doesn't belong in Buffy, because it's too... This would cost $100 million to do this scene. It feels off. And I'm not saying that I have that exact feeling here, but there's definitely some times where like characters are like jumping around a bit too fluid, where I almost feels like one of the things that Predator's always had as a live action thing is that, because everything's live action, and there's a clunkiness to the way people can move around sometimes. There's a clunkiness to the way Arnold like fights the Predator, which makes it feel kind of oddly grounded, despite the fact that he's fighting a 7'5" alien with all these doohickeys and whatnot and what else. So I think for me, as fun as it is, some of the stuff they've got characters doing in here when they're jumping around, flipping around, dodging things, and doing almost Captain America-esque stuff with a shield, for example. It does kind of make it feel like, but like the Predator movies aren't about superheroes fighting predators. They're about relatively real people fighting predators. Relatively, again, they're still movie characters. Like, I'm not, so like, if anything, that was like one of the things that I had to get over like early on. Like, it's probably one of the reasons why I didn't enjoy the first story as much, is because I was still kind of settling into what the rules were in the animated version of this world, and I was kind of feeling a bit like, but there's a lot of flipping around,
Yeah.
Did an actual Viking actually pull off parkour moves like this? I'm not convinced they were, but I'm no expert by any stretch.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get what you're saying. It does go down a certain path where it does have, you basically said superhero moves. It does have that for, I'd say, two of the characters for sure. I think that it's definitely noticeable how much they're able to take comparatively to people in a live action version who, there was one point where a character gets stabbed through the stomach and then they keep going for a while. And I'm like, in any live action movie, that would be the I'm out for the match sort of injury. That wouldn't be the sort of thing where it's I'm going to keep going for a while. And I understand your point there, but I do think, I don't know, it's weird in that what you're describing is having this animation makes it so it's harder to believe that sort of stuff because it's able to be more fantastical. I'm kind of on the exact opposite side of that, where because it's animation, I'm able to buy into it easier. I guess maybe it's because I don't have as much of a connection with the live action stuff, but if I were to see this sort of stuff going on with any sort of live action, I'd be pulled out of it significantly harder because it would feel so cheap or fake or whatever. It felt more believable to me, and I was able to buy in more because it's animation. I was just kind of like, this is just the universe we're in now. And I guess I didn't have that period where I was needing to adjust as much. I just kind of accepted it was. Now, I do accept that sometimes I felt they went a little bit too over the top with how cartoony and superhero it got. You said the Captain America thing, and that's not a one-off. That is consistent for this character. And I think that there's little things there that are a little bit iffy. But for the most part, I was willing to buy into it a lot more than I would for, if we did this in any sort of live action setting.
Yeah, I mean, this is purely a taste thing. This is not like something that should be taken as a harsh critique. But it's actually one of the reasons why I don't tend to like animated tie-ins to like otherwise live action things that I like. Or even like animated movies like that are tying into video games I like. Even like there's just something like I prefer when animation strictly follows the rules of like if we were doing this in live action, could we do this? And I know that sounds like, but you're not like taking advantage of all the things you can do. Well, you can still take advantage. You can still have like a nuclear bomb go off in the background. You can still have all this stuff like raining down from the sky if you want. But like when it comes to the characters and how they interact with the world and how they move, I want them to kind of stick to the grounded rules of how do we do this.
Right.
I think it's one of those things where I don't know, like in the same way that when you're shooting something, like sometimes you'll intentionally do something that's kind of worse looking because it'll make it feel more real. Like the idea that you do a quick zoom in and refocus, not because it looks good per se, but because it makes you feel like you're watching a documentary, because it feels like the cameraman had to quickly react to something, and it just gives it that weird grittiness to it. And that's like an extreme example where I'm not saying everything should feel gritty, but like I think one of the things I don't like sometimes about animation, especially during fight scenes, is that the characters don't feel like they have weight, and I think that bothers me. And it's obviously not something that comes up in some of the animated stuff that I like. Like, when we reviewed Iron Giant, I was singing its praises because I think everything in that movie works, and there's none of these problems that I often have with animated stuff really come up in that movie. So, so this is just kind of like my taste and bias that I'm kind of trying to like get out of the way here and kind of admit to. Because I do think this movie does a lot of really cool things, and I think there's some cool characters. I think it's interesting to explore some of the Predator mythology a little bit, and it does feel like it might not be required viewing, it does feel that by the end it's at least establishing some things that Trachtenberg is going to use or expand upon in other ways down the line.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'd say so. I do, just without harping on it too long, I do understand the feeling you're getting. I think that kind of feeling happened for me when I was trying to sit through the Marvel What If series. And it wasn't so much that it felt like the characters were weightless or anything like that. For me, it was, like you were saying, in the live action movies, there is this level of realness that comes with it. But then the What If series was literally written upon, what if we did this crazy thing instead? What if this like insane thing happened? And it kind of felt like it got too out of the realm of the real for me. This one still felt grounded enough. It still felt like, maybe they'd have to adapt the fight scenes a little bit, but the general overarching stories could be adapted pretty one-to-one, and there wouldn't have to be any major changes to get it into live action.
No, for sure. It's one of the things as well that part of the reasons why a bad movie can be quite funny, at least an older bad movie, because it's not as good when it's all just CG, which it would be now.
Right.
But the idea that, like, the reason why I think it's funny when, like, bad movies or bad action movies specifically don't obey physics, it can be quite funny because you're seeing, like, a real person, or maybe you're seeing, like, a dummy or something, like, do something that it shouldn't, right? And that's actually quite funny because it otherwise looks live action. Whereas in animated form, because everything's just animated, there's nothing, like, when you're watching a live action movie and then someone bends in a way they're not supposed to, it's like, oh, that's weird, or it's funny, or it's whatever. But in an animated film, it's like, well, you can bend them any way you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, it's not special. So, so sometimes I think just, like, accepting, I think, like, I know, and I know that some animated fans are going to hate every word I'm saying, because this is what they like about anime. It's why they hate live action. They would love that animated stuff can just do this as much as they want. But I like limitations when it comes to animated stuff. I like things to feel just like there's some grounded sense of reality where we're not going to do something if we couldn't do it in live action, at least as far as the characters are concerned. Obviously, like if you're going to set something in like an alien world, yeah, you can get away with doing a lot more cool stuff in the background of the alien world because we're not having to pay for it.
Right. I gotcha.
So anyway, movie's pretty good though. Like I don't want to undersell that because I do think that by the end I was kind of, I was into it. Don't get me wrong, I do still think it feels, like a nice side dish. Like I got to the end and I'm like, oh, this is kind of neat. I don't know how much I'll rewatch this compared to the Predator movies that I really like. I think 1, 2, and Prey are I'm going to rewatch those 3 way more than I'm ever going to see this. But I had a good time. It sprinkled in the music here or there, along with a lot of original stuff, because it had kind of music that fit each story. But every so often there'd be a little bit of the da-na-na-na-na-na, or the more brassy things from the movies. Like that stuff would come in the right times. So like that's neat.
Yeah, I will say I went into this completely blind. I didn't even know it was going to be an anthology movie.
Oh,
I did know it was going to be animated. I got that much, but I had no idea anything other than that. And so when it started off with the first story, there's nothing to hint that this is an anthology. There's nothing to say that we're not just going to stay in this one segment throughout the whole thing.
I will counter that though. It hasn't come up right away, but there is a title for each segment. Surely when the title of the first segment came up, you maybe questioned something.
I was questioning it. However, I thought that was because without spoiling too much, the first section focuses a little bit on a mother-son dynamic, a relationship there. I thought we were going to be doing like generations or something, or like the son then takes over for the next chapter, or maybe some other member of the group does, or something like that. But I didn't expect it would leave the time period as a whole behind. That being said, I think that kind of impacted the way that I viewed the first story a little bit, because without knowing that it was going to be an anthology, it felt like it was very rushed for me. It felt like there was an issue of I was moving very quickly, and I'm like, okay, well, we're doing all this. We're only 20 minutes in. What's going on here? And then once it got to the second one, I realized I'm like, oh, okay, we're doing an anthology. I can now sit down and figure, like, I'm going into the second one with a better pace of mind, knowing what we're doing here. So it might have been just a little bit unfair to the first one in that regard. Yeah,
you were expecting an entire Viking Predator animated movie up front. That's interesting. I'm trying to think of what else, because I think the weird thing is that you can't really give like spoiler-free thoughts of each story, because you kind of start to get into some weird territory.
There is one comparison I wanted to make, and it's more of a contrast than a comparison, I guess. But I don't know if you remember, back in the early 2000s, Disney had this weird thing going on with their direct-to-video releases. What they were doing was they were essentially making 3 episodes of a TV show. they were testing that out with test audiences, and if it didn't work out, they took the 3 episodes, they threw them into a very loose framing device, and they shipped it off as a direct-to-video movie. And they did that with like Tarzan, Cinderella, it was one more that I can't remember right now, but like they did it with a bunch of different shows. I don't want to say that I got that feeling from this. However, I do think that where this movie leaves off, no spoilers or anything, but where this movie leaves off, it kind of feels less like a finished product and more like a phase 1. More of a, here's where we're just kicking off this potentially different entire sideline of movies that we can push that aren't the main thing.
Kinda. It definitely feels like it's setting some stuff up. I don't think it's just for another animated movie, though. I will say that.
Okay.
So there's thoughts to be had later. But I think the fact that Dan Trachtenberg is kind of in charge of the Predator universe right now, and which is the first time that's ever happened, by the way. No one's ever like had the reins and treated it like, oh, this is a franchise that I am creating from this point on. Every movie has been so separate up until Prey. And then Prey was successful enough that they kind of gave him the keys and said, hey, you're the Predator guy now. So we're getting this, and obviously the other movie later the year, Badlands. It kind of feels like, yeah, he's laying some groundwork for some other things that he wants to explore. And I'm not saying there won't be another animated movie, but I think specifically some of the stuff that it sets up, there's other projects that have already been talked about, been in the works that I think it relates to. So once we get into spoilers, I'll talk about that a bit more. But
fair enough.
Yeah. But I will say though, I don't think this ever, felt like it was meant to be something else and get turned into this. The Disney thing you were talking about. I think this was always planned as what it was. Yeah, honestly, I think there's too much more we can get into without spoilers. I will say, I guess, that we see obviously different predators in this, and they have different mass. I will say they made them even taller in this. Because when we first see one, I was like, holy shit, this one's like 9 foot tall. It's huge, and it's bulky as shit.
Yeah, this is the first time, because I went on to like a Predator wiki or something like that. Like, are these like all references to things I should know, or is this new stuff for the movie? And I don't know how much it is in the other movies, but at least in comics and stuff like that, there are so many different like tribes and clans and different offshoots of species. It's crazy.
Yeah, I would just ignore all that for the movies though, because I'm pretty sure none of that is remotely canon. Right. I mean, I'm not saying Trachtenberg hasn't read those and might take some inspiration or like use something that he liked, but I don't think any of it's going to be like canon story or whatever.
I'm sure not. Yeah.
So, no, that's fair. I mean, we see some different kinds. We see a bald predator, which was new. We've never seen that before. They've always had the dreads. So I thought it was
you
an
think
interesting
that's
look.
biological, but yeah, I guess they could just shave them off.
Yeah. Well, here it is biological. We can still shave it off.
No, but I mean, like, I don't know. I always got the vibe that like they're kind of like tentacles coming out of the head a little bit. They just look like hair because they've all had them.
I mean, I never jumped to that conclusion, but fair enough.
That's fair. One other thing I wanted to mention, I mean, cast list, it's a bunch of voice actors. There are some notable names in there, but
there's one notable name. There's one very notable name, and weirdly becomes, I think, the second person, unless I'm forgetting other people, who has been in both a Predator and an Alien movie now, and that is Michael Biehn is in this cast.
So it depends on how you count it. The trivia on IMDb goes a step further and says not only Alien and Predator franchise, but also throws in the Terminator franchise.
That's true of Bill Paxton as well, because Bill Paxton's... now, where it gets weird, though, is if you count Lance Henriksen for being an AVP, because he's obviously been an Alien and Terminator as well.
Yep.
Yeah, this is interesting. Actually, I'm thinking about it. Hold on. Michael Biehn... I'm thinking a recent Terminator. I'm thinking, so I don't think you can count Michael Biehn, like Bill Paxton, as having been killed by all three, because in Aliens, he technically he survives that movie. Obviously, Alien 3 has some other ideas, but I'm not going to count that.
I was going to say, technically, if you're going by film canon, what may or may not be true.
Well, yeah, but but in the start of Alien 3, though, is it an alien that's killed him, or is it just the ship crashing that's killed him? Like, you know.
Well, the ship crashes because of the alien in the ship. So,
is there an alien in the ship?
I guess if you want to, yeah, isn't that thing where they show the egg sac came? That's how the alien got to the planet to begin with.
I mean, obviously, yeah, I guess there was an egg. There was a face hugger, I guess. You're getting into hairy territory, though. But the point is, you don't see him be killed on screen. Whereas Bill Paxton was killed on screen by a Terminator, by a Xenomorph, and by a Predator. That's impressive stuff. And then, do you count Lance Henriksen? I don't know. I mean, I think he was killed by a Predator in AVP. So I guess if you're just saying that fact, like who's been killed on screen by one of these things, I guess that counts. Although technically the aliens, he gets split in half. He doesn't get killed by the alien queen. He survives. He lives.
True.
He basically says, "I live, bitch."
Yeah. We'll just give Bill Paxton the crown. Whatever. Yeah, Everyone else has got too many asterisks.
Yeah, Bill Paxton gets all the credit. But I mean, Michael Bihn's been in all three now.
Yeah.
So that's cool. It's cool that he got to tick that off in his late career by doing some voice work. So neat. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really all I have to throw off of this before we get into spoilers. Because I do want to throw out that there's a mid-credits stinger in this. I don't know if you stayed for that.
Well, it's right after the title. Is there another one?
Oh, is it after the title? Maybe not.
Okay.
I was fast forwarding around, and Hulu does some weird stuff with my skip bar. Like, it jumps around every once in a while. I don't know what's going on.
There was a scene right after the title came up at the end. I didn't stay for anything else after that, though. So
okay. That's probably it then.
Yeah. The only other actor I recognize bizarrely is Rick Gonzalez, who played Wild Dog in Arrow, the shit TV show.
I didn't stick around that long on Arrow, so I have no idea who he is.
Yes, he played Wild Dog, that hit DC character that everyone's clamoring for.
Actually, I might know who he is. I'd have to go real far back in his filmography, but I think he was on a show called Reaper back in the day. He was. That was back on like CW, WB, stuff like that. It was a weird little show, but I really enjoyed it.
I think that was like right after they switched to CW. I think it was right in that early CW era.
Yeah.
Anywho, I think we'll get into the spoilers and talk about the movie proper. So, consider yourself warned. We're going to go full spoilery doos from this point forward. Yep. So, here we go. I feel this may actually be quite a quick discussion in some ways, because I think it is mostly action, and there's always so much like describing the action that is going to, come up.
So I know this is a new release, so it's actually going to come out before all of our Superman reviews. But I made the point of, before I came up here, telling my fiance, hey, I don't really feel like I have a whole lot to say about this, so it should be a quick one. And she was like, you said that for the past 2 Superman reviews, and you've been gone for 3 hours. And I'm like, fair enough.
Okay, that's on you. Why would you say that about any Superman movie? You know we're going to talk for 3 hours on Superman movies. I didn't
expect Superman 3 to have that. That one felt like it was out of nowhere.
Oh no, that movie's full of things to talk about.
All right. Fair enough.
And as much as I love Predator, I don't think they're the most complex films from a discussion point of view. So, I mean, I think the first story here, is perfectly fine. Obviously, people, Vikings versus Predator. It's one of those things that always comes up when people have ideas for Predator movies, like, Vikings, right? Samurai's the first one that everyone always says, but Vikings is usually one that gets followed up quite quickly. So we have this female Viking. She's sort of trying to teach her son various things. The main crux of this one, though, is, and we get like a quick flashback at one point, showing that this guy that she's after, this rival, killed her father, or more specifically, made her actually push the blade into him herself, so that the dad says, "Spare my daughter," and he's like, "Oh, she has to like be punished," and the punishment is, to be the one to actually put the blade into her dad. And as the dad's dying, he says, "Avenge me," right? So this idea that she's had this bloodlust her entire life because her father said, "Avenge me," on his deathbed.
Can I just point out,
yes,
he says it exactly the same way that Willem Dafoe says it in Spider-Man 2 in the mirror to Harry Osborn. Do you remember that scene?
I mean, I do, yes.
It's exactly the same cadence and like the same pacing too. I was like, did they just get Willem Dafoe in here? What's happening?
Yeah. So the Vikings character arc really is it doesn't really come in full circle until we get to the last segment, which is when everything comes together. We're in spoilers, so I can say that now.
Yeah.
But this idea that like she's going to feel some guilt because she's sort of imposing all these ideas of revenge and being strong into her son, but it only ends up getting him killed by the predator. So there's this kind of level of guilt and growth that comes from that. So that's kind of like where her character arc, because ultimately, in terms of actually like how this plays out, they go to find this guy that she's been hunting all this time, and when the confrontation happens, lol, is a predator that shows up as well. And chaos ensues.
Yeah, that's kind of the one thing amongst all of these stories. It kind of switches up for the third one, but it seems to be the character has their own independent story,
yes,
and then that completely plays out, and then the predator gets involved because their story involved murder or death or something like that. So the predator sees them as a worthy opponent, a worthy foe.
Yeah, a killer worthy of being killed. Actually,
the killer of killers.
That's what I liked actually about the start of the movie is there's like a quote comes up and it's in predator language and it does the thing where it translates. I think the detail I liked about this is obviously they're sort of saying this is a quote from some predator, from whoever, some predator they all worship, or maybe a heroic predator from like an older time period or something. But I loved that at the bottom there was like almost like it was a date or maybe like a Bible verse or something. There was like 4 digits and then a slash and then 2 other digits, and I went, those numbers mean nothing to us, but I love the idea that we're kind of treating it like they've got their own date system or something, and this is like them saying this is from this year, this is from an important part of the predator history that they all like say to each other when they're in school,
Yeah.
Anyway.
I like it. I think that quote at the beginning kind of set me up a little bit more of thinking this was all going to be one story, because the quote is talking about like, oh, you must go and find like the most strong people, and it speaks very singularly when they're saying it. It doesn't sound like it's speaking like continue this over time and do this for all eras or whatever else. It's kind of setting me up for this one story we're getting into is the one we're going to be following.
Yeah, so there's a whole thing where the son is told to kill like an informant for the guy they're trying to find, and he ends up not kind of hesitating and not being able to do it because the guy's yelling, "You won't go to Valhalla if you kill me, I'm unarmed," blah blah blah, and the mum just kind of steps in and decapitates the asshole. And it's like, okay, all right, so you're setting this up that he's kind of a disappointment to her in a sense. And that kind of inspires him to try and be a bit more brave and a bit more quote unquote ruthless, even though he's clearly kind of green when all the action starts going down. He looks nervous as hell holding that spear and trying to get involved.
Everyone else uses a very close-up weapon, something that involves like a direct combat. He holds a very long-handled spear, so he's able to stay back just a little bit further, but still be involved. It's not like he's shooting bows and arrows from the top shelf or anything like that.
Yeah, because this first story is called The Shield, because it ends up being a shield that the mother really uses. She has an axe as well, but it's the shield that she ends up, we were making the Captain America jokes earlier, but it really does become applicable once it is just her and her shield against a predator. And they do some interesting things here, obviously. Mainly the idea that when they go out onto the ice, because typically in predator movies, we've always had them come to a hot time of year or a hot climate. So it's kind of interesting that she ends up under the ice in the water and he can't see her because all of his vision is based on heat. And obviously this is a sea of ice water, so he can't see anything.
Yeah, that's kind of a recurring motif in this, is they really play along all 3 stories with the idea of predator vision and how it works / how you can kind of juke it a little bit.
Yeah, I like though that she never realizes or doesn't realize enough to like really play with it, right? She's obviously lucky here that you can't see her, but like the third story, the character actually figures it out and realizes the heat is the thing that the predator's targeting. So there's kind of varying degrees as to how they utilize it, which I liked. But yeah, ultimately the whole thing here where she is able to defeat the predator is because he keeps using this sort of grapple thing that sort of pulls stuff back, and she ends up kind of making it work so that he gets pulled back onto the anchor of this like ship that was out there in the water, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to comics people as well, he also has an arm attachment that is essentially Cyborg's sonic cannon, as far as I could tell. It's got like a concussive blast that he has to load up each time manually.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, so the anchor was attached to the Predator, like pinning it down to the bottom of the lake or whatever it is. And then he tries to fire off his sound wave cannon at her, but because she turns it back on, or not even turns it back, she just sort of shields from it. And the force pushes him back as well, and the back of his head goes into the anchor. So he gets stabbed, he gets impaled through the head after he uses his own weapon. So I guess that was the one concern I had, actually, because we got to the end of this first story, because one of the thoughts I was having during this was that, hey, this is an anthology. We might see the Predator win for a change. And when she killed the Predator, as much as luck played a part in it, I thought, wait, are we going to get multiple stories where the Predators all lose? Because I feel like we need to see the Predator win occasionally, otherwise it looks like they're a bunch of chumps, okay? They keep losing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it on the whole, every single one of these there's a group of at least a dozen people that get killed by the Predator to begin with. And then one person manages to overcome the odds and beat them in the end. So, like, yes, they're still effective killers, but I did have the same thought, especially once we get to the ending and we see... I really don't want to spoil it here, but we see all of the different rows that are built up, and all you could think is, man, these Predators lose a lot.
I mean, it's spread out over such a vast span of time that it's probably not that frequent, but it does feel like we never see the examples of them winning. We only ever see the examples where they eventually lose. And I get why, because it's a movie. You have to have your hero win at the end, right? But it would be really interesting and ballsy to have a Predator. Now, I guess we're going to get around that with Badlands because the Predator is the main character. But, in the traditional sense, we always have the Predator.
He's still going to lose. He's still going to end up losing somehow. That's how it's going to be.
First story's all right? There's definitely some, decent action as they're fighting on the ice, and because they start off in like a sort of like temple or whatever you want to call it, and they break out onto the ice. It's fun. Obviously, the son dies in the middle of all this, which is kind of a further motivator.
Yeah, you get. Honestly, the entire beginning of the story kind of comes down to an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Like, it's her realizing that this constant thing of vengeance has led to her own son dying, so she's realizing that maybe that's not the best path forward, but she still has a lot of anger inside of her as we wrap up her story.
Yeah. So I wasn't in love with any of this, though. Like, I thought it was fine. Some of the action was cool, but I definitely get perked up a little bit when the action itself started, just because, hey, a Predator's here. I'm it's kind of what I'm here for. But I think the second story of the Sword, I think, was a little bit just better overall, in the sense that the story it told here about these two brothers, whether or not they're literally brothers or they just call each other brother, because, they're close. It doesn't really matter, but either way. And like you get a quick scene at the start of the second story where it shows that they're close, right? And they're basically playing as kids together. But very quickly, you have kind of the father, the master, or whoever it is,
the shogun.
Yeah, the shogun. He hands them both katanas and makes it clear that they're fighting for this armor that he's got in front of him. Like, it's like one of you gets to be like the samurai that will be my descendant, who will take over for me when you grow up, and the other one will either be dead or humiliated. So, and it feels like neither of them want to do it, and like one's staring, but ultimately the other one at the last possible second runs at him and takes some swipes, and he ends up cutting him on the face, and the whole thing just sort of, it feels awkward, it feels kind of sad. And the one that got slashed, who is kind of the main character of the story, he runs off at the end of the scene, and the story jumps 20 years later, and we get kind of this payoff where you think it's about the punished one, the one that got slashed and had to sort of run away from the palace. He's like coming back for revenge. That's what it seems like anyway, because he's suiting up, he's got the ninja gear, he's getting all the blades and all the rest of it, and we get this extended stealth sequence of him coming in, although notably not killing anyone that he takes out. He knocks them out with a dart, he chokes them out to put them to sleep, but he's not like cutting off heads or anything like that. He's not stabby.
Yeah, and the Predator's around at this point. He's kind of just watching the whole thing unfold, but you can see like from the viewpoint of the predator being invisible off to the side, the parallels of this ninja going around hiding in the shadows and not being seen by any of them.
That's what's perfect about this as a setup, even before we get to the character stuff, is just this idea of like, you know, we're so familiar with the predator going after someone who's a big macho guy with like a giant gun, but like this is someone operating as close to a predator as, you know, anyone we've seen in one of these movies. So, you know, he gets to like his, you know, his brother, right, who's now in charge because the old man's, you know, died. So it's like, okay, it's like, you know, brother versus brother. It's, you know, it's the one who was discarded versus the one who was given the throne. And the big sort of twist, if you want to call it that here, is that when the ninja one, the one we're following, wins, he doesn't kill his brother, he just slashes him on the cheek to match the scar that he's got. And then it's like, it feels like that was him. Like he did what he wanted and he was ready to leave. But just as obviously he's about to leave, we get the predator crashing the party. There's a whole thing here where he looks up like a mural of the dad, and like,
well,
yeah.
Brief pause on that.
Okay.
The brother, he's against a railing, and the railing breaks.
Oh, that happens first.
Yeah, the leader Shogun one falls down seemingly to his death, while Samurai or the ninja one's like, "Oh, I didn't mean for that to happen," and he gets all like upset by it, and that's when he's looking at the mural, and then all of a sudden it transitions into a predator who just comes out and starts attacking him.
Well, comes out of the mouth, and that's because, and you know, he kind of almost goes into like a dream or a flashback, but he sees like a predator like hand coming through the dad's mouth, and that's because the predator's cutting through the mural. So very quickly he starts defending himself from the predator. But when the fight breaks out to the outside and they end up down next to the water, it turns out the Shogun one survived by landing in the water, and they basically have to work together. And I think one of the things that I've not mentioned yet about this story is that other than a couple of lines, it's all played out with no dialogue. And it's these two brothers starting to work together, and it's like this old friendship's forming again out of protecting each other from the predator. And it looks like they're not going to work together at first. It seems like the Shogun might not be, you know, but because when you first find out he's alive, the predator's not there yet. He's not jumped down to meet them, and like he's going to attack the main character, and the main character like sort of blocks a couple of hits and then just goes shh, and like sort of like looks around as if like there's a danger here. Like, I'm not the threat here. There's something else going on. And then it becomes them kind of working together, and it does ultimately become them jumping in and blocking shots when the predator's about to hit one of them. In terms of action, this was probably the one I enjoyed the most out of the whole movie, just because it felt like there was a simple logic to follow. There was this idea of like the teamwork and like that feeling like it was paying off an arc. Like the idea of them two finding each other again and reconnecting by protecting each other felt like it was completing a story as well as being a fun action scene. And then ultimately, of course, they do the thing where it looks like they're going to square off against each other at the end, but they're actually doing like a double swipe of the predator who's invisible against the tree. And, you know, then the invisibility cloak disappears and you see him and he just falls apart. And I was like, okay, that was pretty neat. Like, they had some ideas for this.
Yeah, so like at the very beginning, the intro line, that's one of the only lines of dialogue spoken, is basically, I think it's something along the lines of like, the leaves on the trees grow so close together, but when they fall alone. And it immediately sets up this idea as we go into them separating from each other in their youth of, you know, they grew up tightly knit, they were very close together, but then as they grow up, they grow apart. And then it's showing, you know, as they get back into the swing of things fighting against the predator, it's like no time has passed. They're immediately back in each other's groove. They know exactly how each other fight.
Yeah, they're at their strongest when they're together, and that's kind of the discovery here. And during all this, like the Shogun one did get stabbed by the predator in the stomach, so he keeps fighting. But after the fight, he kind of drops to his knees, and he's clearly dying. And he repeats that line from the start about the leaves together, but then they fall alone. And he's like, "You're not alone, brother." And that, you know, that's you know, and like, oh, you know what? That was a very good self-contained story. The fact that it fades at the end to the main character wearing like a Suicide Squad style collar on a ship, which happened at the end of the Viking story as well, because it sort of showed her on the ship, and then she looked over and we saw the samurai sitting there, and then we sort of fade into his story. So there's kind of like a little bit of a connective. So you do realize, even at the end of the first story, they're probably building up to something where they're all involved together at the end.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my worry was that we were going to get these three stories, and then it was just going to kind of door opens on whatever cell they're in, cut to credits. Like, we wouldn't actually get a connective tissue, but they did have a final scene that really wraps it all together.
Yeah. It still has a big sort of cliffhanger element to it, but I mean, we can discuss at the end what we think that might be leading to.
So that one wraps up. We then it pans over again in the cell, and we see some dog tags, which then goes into the World War II. And I do want to say up front, beginning the World War II one, it felt the weakest to start. It felt like I was the least engaged with this.
I agree. But then it played its hand, because it skips ahead. He gets conscripted, drafted into the war, and then he's on a ship, and the only thing we really knew about him was he wanted to be a pilot, and it seems like he's kind of there, where maybe he's not been given the permission to actually fly yet, but he's clearly learned how to do it. He's clearly learned how to fix the engines and all that. And basically what this turns into, and this makes it very unique as far as the Predator story goes, is that this is basically a story about an invisible ship that's destroying their planes in the sky. So it completely changes the dynamic of, like, instead of being a typical Predator story, this is like, at least as far as they're concerned, there's like a spirit in the sky that's killing us. And I'm like, that's kind of a cool vibe. Again, kind of like the samurai one, I was almost like, I kind of wish there was a whole movie about, like, the invisible ship in the sky killing the planes. But this is the one that's got Michael Biehn voicing the character. He's like the superior, like, elder pilot who's like, nah, you're grounded, son. You're not coming out with us. But of course, when one of the wrecked planes comes back, it's got like a what would you call it? The hook from, like, basically the big Predator ship has these hooks with tethers that it shoots out and pulls the ships apart with. So one of the wrecked planes comes back with this thing in it, and he starts, like, trying to, like, mess with it and, like, break into it, and it's, like, impenetrable, but it kind of eventually forms, and it rips the engine of the plane in the bay out, and, like, shit, whatever's up there they're not prepared for. So he basically just goes and gets his own plane and flies up against orders to try and warn everyone that there's something up there.
He goes down to the radio guy, and it's just like, you got to call them. There's something they're not prepared for. It's like, they're out of range. We can't call them. He's like, well, I'm going to go get in range. And so we see this old rinky-dink-ass ship or plane that he's got fixed up that they don't even think is going to be able to fly, and he gets it up there as best he can.
Yeah, so he flies up, and obviously they're saying, hey, get out of here, kid. But then, of course, the Predator ship starts killing them one by one. And we get a variety of things here. Like I said, there's the grapple hook type thing that pulls one apart. And it actually pulls, like, through the pilot of one of the planes and pulls him right out the back of the plane, which looked kind of cool. There's another one that's like which is a bigger version of something that was in Predator 2, the net that kind of, like, cuts in. We get that on one of the planes, and that. Then it gets to the point where it's just the main kid, Torres, and the older pilot, and just their planes are left.
Yeah, I do want to mention one death, though, that was brutal, and it showed just how much the Predator was just kind of messing with them, is one of the planes manages to fire off some shots from behind the ship, and he's got big old, like, rocket propulsion things that can angle at any different angle. So he basically throws it in reverse, gets right up in front of the plane, throws it back into forward, and aims the rocket thruster directly onto this plane, just incinerating the guy. And it is brutal. Yeah.
I don't remember exactly when it decloaks for the first time, but that's obviously a big deal because they all see this giant spaceship and they're like, shit, what is this? But yeah, it gets into playing with some things where the old, Michael Bihn's character's like, hey kid, what have we got? And he basically figures out that because one of his engines was on fire and he was able to kick it off the plane, the Predator then targeted that, and he realizes, the heat is what attracted it. So he kind of deduces, hey, if we go up higher up and we get the planes nice and cool and shut off the engines, he won't be able to see us. And so I actually really thought they did a good job of really giving us that sense of, that moment when they're kind of like, the engines are off and the plane's just sort of slowly tipping to go back down. Because they sort of turn it off when they're sort of propelled upwards. So it still goes up a little bit just on kind of like,
inertia.
Inertia. And then kind of tilts over and goes back. And I think that feeling of it going over, like you're at the top of a roller coaster, I got that feeling as it was getting ready to do it.
The 0G. Right.
Yeah. And so Michael Biehn sacrifices himself and says, I'm going to distract it, kid, and keeps his engine on, so he's a target for it. And it's like a lasso that rips through the plane that gets him. He gets decapitated with this thing.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get it for the moment. It's definitely a shock, but it does feel so brutal of like, I'm going to do whatever I can. And, you're expecting the ship to blow up, it being this painless yet also non-messy sort of thing. But no, you see it brutally. It killed him instantly, so no pain, but damn, was it messy.
Yeah, I think I like, because this is the bald predator, so every time we cut back to the predator in his cockpit, he looks kind of weird and different. And I kind of like the idea.
He's got like a single eye patch on as well, maybe for like targeting or something.
Yeah, it's not really an eye patch. It's maybe more of like a, I don't know, like a sort of like a cyborg sort of like thing that he's like a Universal Soldier style thing over his eye, or whatever it is. Right. But I like the idea that he's like a particularly vicious bastard of a predator, because they all have their own personalities to a point, and the way he's killing people here feels very unsporting compared to a lot of the other predators, and I kind of like the idea that this is just him. He's just a prick, and he's enjoying being extra brutal for no reason.
Yeah, I think that's part of what I like about this movie, and we'll get to the big lore drops that they do later on, but for this one, it definitely feels, from everything else we know about the Predators, from what I am aware of it, it's always been this thing of the game. Like, you go out and you hunt these things down by hand, and there's the whole thing of like basically ripping out their spines and getting their skulls and all that sort of stuff. And this guy doesn't seem interested in any of that. He's just there to kill as many as possible. He feels more like he's for numbers rather than quality itself.
Yeah. But he gets particularly vindictive, because once the main character starts firing at his engines and whatever, which does damage his ship a little bit, it becomes this chase, and he ends up flying into like the actual naval battle that's happening, and he's like, oh, I've never been so glad to see the enemy. So they both start, he has to start dodging all these cannon shots, and some of them hit the Predator ship, and he actually thinks he's beat the Predator ship at one point, because it's in the water, but there's a great moment where you see the lights sort of turn on from under the water, and it's stalking him like Jaws from under the water, and he comes back up. I mean, the way he ultimately wins is a little bit over the top, because it kind of involves like the grapple from the Predator ship kind of whipping round and hitting itself with some of his ship. It's a bit much, compared to everything else.
It sets it up earlier on. We skipped over the intro scene where he's talking to his dad, and they're talking about fixing up the car, and he wants to be a pilot. And the dad specifically mentions, you flooded the engine. Like, there's too much gas in the engine. You got to fix that first. And so he comes to the conclusion that because this thing always targets the engine blocks, because that's where the most heat is from, he's going to flood the engine with gas, let it target it, and essentially turn it into a giant firebomb that'll whip its way around and like explode as it hits the ship. And it's not a bad plan, but it does feel like, how did you know that was going to whip around exactly the way you needed it to? It didn't feel like you did anything particularly special there to ensure that. It kind of just felt like, fate stepped in and made sure it worked.
Like, he was so confident, and I think it's the whipping around that bothers me, because that's the part that feels like it's just just because that's, of course, it's going to hit the ship exactly perfectly. But hey, like, ultimately though, I did really like the setting of what this was once you get into the aerial combat stuff, because it was like, okay, this is very different. It feels kind of cool to have this invisible ship like taken out, and almost this idea that stories might start spreading of like, well, we lost 2 planes and we don't know why. It wasn't the enemy. Like, something else is up there.
You expect this to be something that's like attributed to like the Red Baron or something like that, where it's like, oh, this amazing ace pilot who came out of nowhere, killed everyone, and disappeared.
Yeah, or even like, I compared it to Jaws before with that other moment, but like, this is basically could just be Jaws in the sky. Like, if you go into the sky, that whatever this is might come out of the clouds and get you, kind of thing.
Right.
But I like, it was definitely interesting and different, and I like the unique look to the Predator here as well. So this is the one character out of the 3 leads that actually speak English. So that's important going into the next part, because he's the one that we understand.
It is worth noting that for, like we said, the middle story, it's basically entirely silent.
Yeah.
I think it's all subtitled Japanese.
Yes.
But for the first story, there is dialogue. It is at first presented into Old Norse, but then they switch over to English. So you're not reading subtitles the entire time.
Yeah.
But it is, once we get all 3 of them together, it is specifically, this guy's the only one you can understand. Everyone else is speaking their respective languages.
Yeah. We still get subtitles for them, which is, part of the, because there's a little bit of comedy almost when like they're reacting to him, because he's a bit more hyperactive. He's trying to be friendly with them. The samurai, when this guy gets thrown in the cell, because we actually, because it's transitioning into the sort of the end game part of the movie, we actually see more of what happens here, where we see like the ship come and get him. You know, he walks outside, he's back at home after the war, and like the giant invisible predator ship decloaks, and he's like, oh shit. So we kind of get a bit more of a glimpse of what happens here. This idea that it's not like they're immediately taken. Like some ship comes and gets them later after they've like killed a predator.
Yeah, that's the part that gets me, is that what this is implying is that every other movie, because pretty much every other movie has had a human killing a predator, means that in all of those movies, fast forward 6 months, fast forward a year, a giant ship shows up and says, hey, you're coming with us. You killed one of our own. And it kind of feels like, obviously it's not what it ends up being, but it kind of feels like a space cop sort of thing, where it's like, you committed murder, now you will pay the price, and they just take him away.
I mean, I don't think there's any guarantee that it happens to everyone. Like, you know, I mean, maybe there could be some speculation, like, did Arnold and Danny Glover get taken sometime later? But I don't think you necessarily have to assume it happened to all of them. Obviously, there's one that it did happen to, which we'll get to later.
Yep.
But, you know, they're together. The samurai, you know, says in Japanese, like, did you kill one of these beasts as well? And obviously, like, he's like, oh, I learned a little bit of Japanese and basic. And he's able to say what his name is in Japanese, but then he tries to say something else and he says he's a fish. And immediately the samurai is like, oh, okay, I'm not talking to you.
Also, I think he holds out his hand for the Viking lady and she just spits in it. And it's like, all right, so we've got a good little dynamic going on here.
Yeah. So they're taken out of their cell. There's like predator guards that walk them out, basically into an arena, right, where there's a crowd of predators. And it turns out they've been brought here to fight to the death. And then the winner will face the leader of the predators here. Well, he's the leader of all the predators, or just like, you know, someone high ranking. Doesn't really matter. But we have this big kind of leader predator with big long dreads who's gun ho about taking on the winner.
He's got like a skeleton cape, and I think the skeleton is made of the tails of aliens, like xenomorphs, because it got like the spikes on the end.
I don't think I noticed that, but that's a cool little catch.
Yeah.
If it was. Yeah, so basically their little collars translate what the predator's saying for them, so they understand what they're being told that is happening. So like the American kids like, oh whoa, wait a minute now, come on now, let's not have this. We have to work together. And to be fair, like the samurai very quickly is like, hey, I beat one of these things because I worked with someone, not against them. And he's trying to like garner this idea of like working together. Whereas the Viking lady's like, no, I want to die in combat. This is honorable. They pop out like a weapon for each of them. It's like, hey, a weapon of your clan, I think is what they said. And you know, out pops an axe, an old Viking axe for the lady, a katana for the samurai. And then the middle thing pops out for the guy, and it's the old pistol from the end of Predator 2, to which he rightly points out, that's not from the right century, assholes. I don't know how to use this old gun.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, time-wise, where does that put this movie? I don't think it's a big deal, but obviously the last time, chronologically, we saw that gun is the end of Predator 2. When it's handed off to Danny Glover, correct?
Yeah, I don't think this is confusing at all, so I'm confused. I'm curious as to what question you're about to ask.
Well, my question is, so is there a place where this gun stays with the Predators and then gets handed off to Danny Glover at the end of his movie? Or does Danny Glover's movie happen, the Predators somehow get back the gun, and then this movie happens?
This is before Predator 2.
Okay. Fair enough.
That at least that's the logical thing that makes sense to me. This is before Predator 2.
No, that's fair. I mean, it does. I do like how this was obviously a little Easter egg that was over in Prey. So it does feel like this is something that Dan Trachtenberg's kind of just keep your eye on the bouncing ball. Like we're just following this around a little bit as it moves throughout the universe.
I mean, it's always possible as well. The Predators have keep duplicating them, so they've got like a warehouse full of these pistols.
I mean, that seems like a weaker explanation than the others, but fair enough.
But I think this is clearly after Prey, which makes sense because at the very least it has to be after 1942 or whatever the time was where the American.
That was like 17. Oh, you mean 1942, the World War II guy? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, because they've got all three of these characters, so it has to be after that time, right?
Right.
So somewhere between then and Predator 2 is when this future, or not future, but this planet stuff takes place. So
That's fair.
that makes sense to me. Anyway, so yeah, so he doesn't really know. He tries to fire it, he doesn't know how to use it, because he's like, oh shit, I need to put the bullets and the gunpowder in, I need to figure out how to do this. And the only bullet he ever fires is to sort of stop the other two. Like, he stops the Viking lady from killing the samurai. Hits her axe.
Yeah.
And tries to like convince them that, hey, maybe if we can get up there and take that ship, maybe he can fly. He's a pilot. Maybe, and obviously they don't really understand. He's trying to sort of do like the plane hands to
Yeah. He just like points up to the warlord one and is talking. He's saying like, hey, we can get up there. We can do whatever. And the Viking lady's just like, yes, I will kill him too after I kill both of you. And he's like, that's not what I meant. God damn it.
Yeah, I think what's funny about this to me, especially after the big like monster, there's like a big, we'll call it the predator bear or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, but they bring
it's like the lion in the gladiator pit.
Kind of, yeah. And it's got big tusks, kind of almost very predator like the predator's teeth. And this thing eats the young American guy. But he's whole, so he's still alive. He's kind of inside. And I did actually love the visual of him finding the arm of a predator in there, because we saw a predator get eaten by this thing, and he basically finds the arm. It's got the gauntlet on it, and he starts pressing buttons, and a blade pops out, and he's like, "Oh, great!" And we cut to a shot where he's just like ramming this blade into like the passage inside this monster's mouth. He's just like stabbing it from the inside, and it looks kind of funny but violent at the same time, where he's just kind of like, okay, I'll just stab it as much as I can until it gets hurt enough to let me out.
Yeah. Like, you feel it. You feel that what he would be doing would obviously be painful to this beast, but it's framed so comedically that it is just a comedy moment.
Yeah. So I think what got me though is he pops back out in like a little kind of speeder thing, right? And obviously,
yeah, the beast goes down because the samurai and the Viking team up to take it down.
Yes, they finally
and then it kind of gets it just kind of gets bulldozed away off to the side, like into a trash pit area. But the kid's still inside of it.
Yeah, the Viking and samurai teaming up is very, very Godzilla Kong, where they're fighting, and eventually the one who is refusing to accept that maybe we should work together finally kind of like gets the idea. And then like what's a point along the way, she picks up like a scrap bit of metal, or maybe it's like the Predator shield, but she picks up something that she can use as a shield, and from that point on she's kind of in her element because she's got her signature weapon. So there's a lot of that them playing out. But he comes back out, the kid comes back out in a speeder, and I was like, okay, like he's from 1942. Obviously, this is kind of advanced and future for him, but he's used to cars and planes. He understands a vehicle. He understands the fundamentals. Yeah. And they both hop on. He's like, come on, hop on. And they both jump on the back. And I had this thought as he was driving them off. I'm like, they've never been in anything with a motor before. They must be like thinking all sorts of weird things about this. Like this weird horse they're on.
I'm honestly surprised that especially the Viking lady does not already assume she's dead. That this is not just the afterlife. Like the samurai one seems to be like forward thinking and logical enough. Like he's actually putting two and two together here, that maybe he could just say like, yes, this is some crazy world or element or something, because I fought literally a giant beast. But the Viking lady, they were equating their predator with the Grendel, who I believe is from Beowulf. So clearly this is all just myth and lore to her. She may as well just be like, yeah, this is some crappy version of Valhalla I got to get out of.
So they do a thing here as well where when they do get up to the ship and like he flies the ship off and they're taking off, and the predators fire like a big grapple hook, right? They've got a giant metal grapple hook that they fire from this big cannon, and it tethers the ship and they're sort of holding it in place, right? Yeah. She has this big moment where she sacrifices herself to save them, where she's basically grapples down, zip lines down the big chain with her shield. But she turns and looks at, the American, like, I say kid because he's younger, he's like 23 or something. But she turns and looks at him and she says, in her own language, she doesn't even understand her, but we get to see what she says. She says, "Do not avenge me." And it's just completing her arc that she has learned that that's, like, the cycle of revenge and violence is not the thing to pass on. It's like, no, don't avenge me. Go on, live, a better version of your life, whatever you can live. And she zip lines down. She basically she destroys the grapple thing so they can fly off. And that's
not to fully skip over it though. I mean, there was the giant long extended fight scene between the two of them, the kids in the ship, and the warlord predator.
Yes.
And I mean, it's a fantastic fight scene. I think they do a great job of really selling that, like the strength of this guy and how even it kind of reminded me of the end of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where
Sure.
you know, all of them fighting separately, they never stood a chance. Even fighting together, they're kind of only just like barely holding on here. They're barely managing to go up against this guy.
The samurai gets his arm cut off.
Right, yeah. It's a brutal shot. And it's
Yeah.
a sword arm too. It's not even like it's the other one.
Yeah, he gets his arm taken off. There's a lot of like them jumping in to like defend each other, and because that was one of the things that obviously you're thinking maybe as you're watching this is that Torres, the American guy, he's not a hand-to-hand combat person. Like he was a pilot. He was worked with machines. Like he doesn't really stand a chance in a fight with a predator. So the other two are kind of jumping in and saving his ass constantly. So,
but then once he gets in his plane, he's maybe not in his element for this particular fight scene, but at least he's able to get them out of there. He's able to escape the fight.
He's invaluable. He's like the most important one because he can fly a ship, you know. So obviously he gets the moment where he sits in the controls and he's like, all right, it can't be that different. Let's play around here and see what I can do.
I kind of was hoping he would get into the cockpit. I mean, I know we've seen Predator cockpits before, but I was kind of hoping he would get in there, and it's just like a single ball just floating in midair, and he's like, I don't know how to work this. This is completely alien to me.
Luckily, there's a couple of joysticks. He's able to figure out some basics. But yeah, once she sacrifices herself and it lets them fly off, I mean, the movie, you know, the main part of the movie ends with like, you know, this, okay, let's go on a hunt predators, and like all these predators and their ships start gearing up to chase them. And it ends on a cliffhanger where they're flying out, just these, you know, the samurai and the soldier together, and they're off to go. And it's like, okay, this feels like you could follow this up in some form down the line. I mean, it does kind of work as kind of the open-ended ending. You know, it's this idea of, okay, maybe they've got a chance, they've flown off, maybe because they're working together. You know, but I mean, the samurai's lost an arm. He's not going to be that effective as a samurai with one arm. Right. You know? So
this absolutely strikes me as the sort of thing that is going to be, or very well could be, a background Easter egg in Badlands or whatever future project. Like, it doesn't feel like it's something that requires a great deal of focus, but you're going to get like some message from the Predator leader or whatever to this one that we're following saying, hey, any luck on that hunt for the two escapees or something like that. Like something minor.
At the same time, though, it wouldn't shock me if in Badlands, or maybe the sequel to Prey, which is the other thing that I think it could pop up in, it wouldn't surprise me if we do see live action versions of these two characters. It'll work on its own in the sense that, oh, these are just other humans that have escaped captivity from the predators and they're surviving out here. But if you've seen this movie, you'll have this extra context. Now, I'm not saying that I expect that necessarily or that I need it, but I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't be against, like, you know, because I mean, let's say what the little scene after the title is at the end, which is, you know, we're just going through this giant like fortress where all these like, because this is the thing, they've all been in cryo sleep. That's why they're all awake at the same time. Is they've just woken up these three to have their fight. But we're walking past all these pods of like various things in cryo sleep. There's like a creature at one point. I thought that the tease here was going to be a xenomorph. I thought we were going to see a xenomorph in ice.
Yeah, same. I was waiting for it.
Instead, it walks past the pod and the camera kind of, virtual camera comes into the pod, and who's in the pod, and it's you know, it's the character from Prey. It's her. Like they've got her on ice. And one of the things that has been in the news as they were developing these movies is that, okay, Predator Badlands is the next movie, but he's also developing a sequel to Prey. Like, Badlands isn't the sequel, quote unquote, to Prey. It's another Predator movie, but there's a direct sequel to Prey in the works as well. And given that what they've shown here, I have to assume the sequel to Prey is her being woken up and like, okay, now she has to survive here on the Predator world.
So I was remembering when I watched Prey, they do a similar thing in this movie as well, where the ending credits up until it starts scrolling are very stylized. It's like a picture of everything that happened in the movie in the art style of whatever it was that we were watching. So, you know, the Viking is very Norse looking and stuff like that. But I remembered at the end of the Prey one, they gave a little bit of a hint and a tease, and they showed Naru was the name of the girl. She returned back to her tribe. She was doing the stuff. And then it ended on this cliffhanger-esque thing of a giant Predator ship showing back up in the sky.
Very similar to the soldier or the pilot characters and what he saw,
Yep. So I think that may have been planned out even that far in advance of like, this is them coming back and picking her up sort of thing.
Which is a very interesting sequel to Prey. It's like, okay, we're going to take her out of her element and put her like, okay, you proved yourself, but now you have to do it here where you're not with your, your own environment, your own knowledge and weapons. No one's going to speak your language. So that's going to be an issue. You don't have your dog. That was a big help in Prey. So there's a lot of things there where like you can see what they might do with that. It definitely, given that they've talked about an active sequel to Prey, like a direct sequel to Prey in development, this feels like an intentional tease of whatever they're doing with that sequel to me. Because what else makes it a direct sequel if it's not that character, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing is that they set it in that interstitial. They set it in the middle of another Predator ship shows up and maybe she tries to like run away from it. And we just spend the whole movie of her trying not to get recaptured again. But I don't know if that would be enough to really hold the movie.
Yeah, I think that would be unfulfilling. I think if you're showing us this here, I think you have to pick up the sequel. Maybe there'll be a couple of flashbacks to before she got taken. You know, I could see them fleshing it out that way. But I think the main bulk of the movie would have to be after she's woken up in the Predator world.
Now, let me ask you this. Would you be okay with if the sequel to Prey is animated, if it is this style and we just follow, this style for the rest of her story?
I'd be disappointed because, no, give me that actress, give me her doing the performance again, like, pay it off proper. If it's a sequel to Prey, then it should feel like a sequel to Prey. If it's animated, it'll technically still be a sequel, but it'll feel like weird to me. So no, I'd rather be live action.
And I am looking at the actors who played the samurai and Torres, and they are both like not typically voice actors. They have done voice work, but typically they are actors, and they do pretty much both look like their animated counterpart. So I think if we did transition them over into live action, we could just reuse these same actors.
I think what's interesting as well is they're a bit older than their characters are supposed to be, which might make sense because given that we're talking about cryosleep here, there's nothing to say that Naru is woken up in the same year. Like she may be woken up 20 years later, 30 years later. Hell, Predator Badlands, if let's say the follow-up to these characters is in Badlands, it might be them finding the ship with skeletons on it because they've been dead for a century. There's no reason to say that the follow-up is them been alive. It might be, oh no, they survived for some time, but they ultimately never made it off the planet, which would be a little sad, but that would make some sense.
That would 100% be able to make it an Easter egg as well, because all you would need is to show a skeleton with dog tags and a skeleton missing an arm, and there you go. That's it.
And we kind of know for a fact that Badlands, I mean, assuming that I'm right in saying this is set before Predator 2, because I am assuming that pistol comes with Naru. When the Predators get her, they get that pistol, and then obviously they give it back to Danny Glover as like a reward. And maybe that also suggests that they don't take people in from the 1980s onwards, because they didn't take Danny Glover, they gave him a prize. Like, hey, you've proven yourself. Maybe something changes fundamentally between 1942 and the future of 1997 that we saw in Predator 2.
I mean, if the follow-up somehow manages to kill that giant warlord one, maybe he's the one who was really pushing for the capture system. Maybe once he's gone, it's like, well, nobody else really wants to do that because this guy got killed.
Maybe whatever happens in Prey 2 makes the Predators say, okay, instead of capturing those who kill one of us, we should just honor the fact that they succeeded or something. Maybe there's like a change in their politics, if you will, after Prey 2. Who knows? But but I think we know for a fact that Badlands is set much later because, not to spoil too much from the trailer, but there is absolutely a Weyland-Yutani droid in the trailer. So it's set in the future in the time of Weyland-Yutani. Now, whether or not it's actually directly exactly in the same time as the Alien universe, or it could be much later, it could be an old droid that's woken up like centuries later, who knows? But it's definitely not, pre-1997. I'll say that much.
Right. Fair enough.
That's the funny thing about saying that they're in the same universe, Predator and Alien, and that Predator 2 is canon, and the gun kind of confirms it absolutely is canon, is that you're basically saying that in the future of Alien, where Weyland-Yutani came into power, the 1997 of Predator 2 is the 1997 that happened. That was like a period that LA went through before we get to Weyland-Yutani.
Yeah. Nah, I mean, that's fair.
That's funny to me.
it was localized at the very least.
True.
It's not like it was that town from AVP Requiem where it was just the entire town got nuked.
No one cared about that town, though. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do not think they'll be bringing up much from AVP 1 or 2 into the modern canon.
AVP is 100% written out of canon. I don't doubt that at all.
It's so wild how they're both kind of popping off, though, because like we got Predator Badlands. We just had this, obviously. We got Predator Badlands later this year. The Alien Romulus sequel's filming later this year for whatever. Alien Earth, the TV show for FX, is later in the summer. Like, they've got a lot of things going, and there is some rumors of them working together on another AVP of some kind, which I don't think is a bad idea in general. I think a good AVP movie could be cool. Which is why I'm kind of expecting like a proper teaser, like, you know, either at the end of Badlands, here's a Predator showing up, or at the end of Alien Earth, here's a Predator like weapon or something that's, you know, something just sort of further like the fact. I mean, hell, what am I saying? They've got, like I said, there's a Weyland-Yutani droid in this new Predator movie. Like that's already them basically saying, hey, we're in the same playground here. Eventually, we're going to do something with this.
I mean, this is 100% Disney just being like, look. We're not going to go as big with our cinematic universe here, but we are still doing a cinematic universe. We're still going to be putting these in the same playground.
Alien and Predator were technically connected long before a lot of other cinematic universe. I mean, I can't really say they're connected before Marvel was, because Marvel from the comics was already connected, but, you know, like, the alien skull was at the end of Predator 2. Like, and that was inspired by the comics, of course, but, like, they did it on film before there was ever any Marvel shenanigans.
I just want to know what production, like set designer or whatever like that, can we point to back in the day and say, like, you are responsible for everything else that happens afterwards because you wanted that damn skull in the shot.
I mean, I like the idea that it's like a much smaller in scope, like shared universe. It's not something where we're going to have like 3 movies and 2 TV shows every year. Like, that would be far too much. Like, this year we have, I mean, we can have 2 movies for Predator because of the animated one. But we have 1 live action movie and 1 TV show, right? Next year, we may not get anything next year, and then it'll be maybe 1 movie that following year, you know? Like, like if they rotate Alien and Predator movies every other year, like, I'm not going to be that's not going to feel too much to me. And at the very least, my hope is that my complaints with Romulus being too nostalgia-driven, that's out of the system now, and hopefully the next one can just be more of its own thing. That would be my hope anyway. So
yeah, the next one will be the Last Jedi of the franchise.
David, what are you rating Predator Killer of Killers?
I went into this not expecting much, because as much as I said, you know, all I really knew going into this was an animated movie, I also knew this was kind of, I don't want to say a stopgap, but like the spin-off. This is something where Predator Badlands is the official. This is something where it is more of a side story. I did know that much, at least going in. However, I do feel like I was surprised by the quality of it. I do feel like this was something where it was more than what I was expecting out of it. So I think really looking at it in that sort of lens, I think it's 7.5. I think that's honestly where I'm at with this. It was a good time. I like the expansions to the Predator lore, Predator mythos, however you want to say that. And I think more so than anything else, I like the direction that Dan Trachtenberg is taking with the Predator universe, where it does feel like there's a little bit more cohesion, a little bit more of, we're telling maybe a longer form story over the course of several movies rather than just each one being their own individual thing. And this one feels like the first kind of step along that way, where Prey could have been just individual if it needed to be. This one feels like the first one where it's saying, strap in, we're going to be doing something that might take a few years to get full resolution on. And it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like a Marvel Cinematic Universe sort of thing. It just feels like someone who's going to be telling a little bit more of it's sort of in the same way as like the John Wick universe, where it's like we're still just following this one idea, but it's just going to be taking a few movies to get there.
I mean, I think it's maybe less that. It's not, because it's not a serialized story per se. I mean, there might be some serialized elements in the future, especially if they're doing a direct sequel like Prey, but more just that we're expanding our idea of what a Predator movie can be. And this is like a tease of that. I think Badlands is going to be the real test, the real kind of like, okay, does this completely fundamentally change what a Predator movie actually is and what it can do? Not that we'll necessarily have to say goodbye to the classic style. I suspect we'll still go back to that occasionally for some cool ideas that they might have. But yeah, I think for me, I liked it more than I thought I would. Even with my caveats, even with some of my taste and bias coming in, I still think it probably is a solid 7 out of 10. And there's definitely parts of this that I found myself going, that's a really cool moment, or that's a really cool idea. But, you know, I think fundamentally, and some animation fans are going to hate me saying this, it's always going to feel like a sort of like a side dish because of just inherently what it is. Now, that's not to say that they couldn't start doing a bunch of animated movies and they might be all amazing and it'll feel like, hey, this has carved out its own new series, but it'll always feel like a sort of like either a sub-series or like a tangential series to the live action ones. It's always going to feel like that to me. And that's just, you know, that's just me. That's not like anything you have to take that seriously. It's not a big deal, but it is what it is. The main event is later this year with Badlands. For better or worse. It might be a worse movie. We don't know yet, but...
Man, can you imagine if Disney gave him the keys to the Predator franchise and says, all right, you get 2 that go straight to Hulu. If they both do well, you go to theaters. And then the theater one fails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, to be fair, Prey was, I think, originally meant to be a theater thing, and then things changed because of the pandemic. It was like a...
fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, obviously Trachtenberg's got a good track record at this point. I'm feeling confident that he's going to do something interesting with Badlands. So, yeah, we'll see how that is. But, yeah, obviously David's got his homework, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that I know what it is, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'll just tell you about Patreon and YouTube memberships just now. If you want to support the show and all the content we do and help keep it coming, you can do that with a little bit of money every month, and by doing so, you'll get access to some bonus shows that we do every month, like the Criterion Cut or Extra Reels. Extra Reels is a monthly show where we review some of the worst things ever made, and boy, there are some real stinkers. For example, Steel, starring Shaquille O'Neal. That's this month's episode of Extra Reels coming up soon. So if that sounds like fun, and sometimes we do even more garbage bottom barrel stuff like Neil Breen or Uwe Boll, like that's the place for it. That's where we torture ourselves. So yeah, anyway, you get bonuses. We also do the extended ratings of movies, where we'll do like rated in the video, rating the audio, rating the acting. We call that the ratings rundown now. So we sort of, you know, to keep the episode lengths down a little bit, because we tend to go long on some of them. We cut that out and put it as a separate thing, and that's available to patrons and YouTube members. So even a one-time super thanks on YouTube is greatly appreciated. Any support of any kind is greatly, greatly appreciated. But anyway, before we go, the ending of Ace is always David with his homework. Now, what did you think of Adrian Brody? Is that his name?
Yes, Adrian Brody.
Yes, thank you.
How dare you just assume, Peter, that I would watch the next film in the Predators franchise when I'm watching the next film in the Predator franchise?
It's the Predator not the Predators franchise. There's a Freudian slip, because you can even keep it a secret that you did Predators.
I love this so much because I didn't. I went with Dan Trachtenberg's 10 Cloverfield Lane. I decided to stay in director. I didn't continue the franchise.
Such a failure. You are such a failure in every possible way.
Oh, God, I was sitting on that one the whole review. I was just letting you think it. Oh, boy. I did 10 Cloverfield Lane.
This is just a fundamental failure of you to tie in things appropriately. Because you still have to...
The director's not enough.
You have to do Predators and the Predator before Badlands comes out. You know this, right?
Yeah, I absolutely will. I have no problem with that, but that's a long way down the road.
You must... It's like 3 months. 2 months even.
Yeah. 3 months, and how many episodes do we have in the in-between? I only got to get 2 done. That's not a problem.
You must suffer.
I will, but I didn't want to this week. I wanted to do 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Well, yeah, it's a good movie. So you watched Did you see this before? Was this the first time watch?
I did. This is actually a second time watch. I only ever watched it the one time in theaters when it first came out. I did actually catch this one on initial release. I remember really liking it. I hated the person I went with, but that's a completely different story.
Bad breakup, was it?
It's something similar. So yeah, no, it was just not attached to good memories, but the movie itself, I remember really, really liking. And, I, like many people, going to see it initially kind of thought, oh, how is this going to tie into the original Cloverfield? How is this going to be set in that universe? Only to discover that's not what we're doing. We're now just in an entirely separate universe. We're doing our own different thing here. And in that regard, a little disappointed. I was really into the original Cloverfield mythos story, ARG stuff going on. When this one decided to do something else, I was kind of waiting the whole time, but never got there.
Have you revisited Cloverfield? Have you done that as homework yet?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And did you think it held up when you watched it?
I think I definitely saw it as a lot weaker than I remembered it being, but I still...
I guess the point I'm getting at is that this not actually being connected to the first Cloverfield is an absolute blessing in hindsight, because it's a much better movie.
In hindsight. Absolutely. Yeah. But again, it's that mystery box that JJ does. All the ARG aspects of it and the stuff you can get into online, I really like that stuff. So... with this not being in that same sort of line.
Rabbit's foot, everyone. What could the rabbit's foot be?
Hey, look at that. But yeah, no, I went into this one and I still think it is great. I do think, coming back to it now, full spoilers, the ending does kind of feel like a swerve out of nowhere for me. I think the first time I watched it, I took it all as one big whole that really worked. But looking at it now, I think that everything up to the escape and then going into that ending bit, it does kind of start to lose steam very quickly from there. And I think it might just overstay its welcome just a tiny bit too long. But the first 90% of the movie is fantastic. I love all of that. The tension building, the pacing, the way the characters interact, all of it's just really, really well done. So all in all, I am still going to hit this one with a solid 8.5. I think it's really, really well done, but it is something where I think initially leaving it, I would have said this one was like a 9 or something like that. I think that it's detracted a little bit with time passing on. And that's to say nothing about Cloverfield Paradox, which just kind of soured the whole franchise in hindsight, but whatever.
I actually, if I remember correctly, I think I liked the ending more when I did it for the show. I actually went up.
Really?
It went up a little bit in my estimation. But I think part of that was kind of paying more attention to the character and how it paid off her arc throughout the movie. But that's a whole discussion for well, we already did the episode,
Never.
But but I don't want to get into it too in depth. But no, it's very good. I want to say we did it before Prey came out, and it was oh yeah, this is right. This was really good. Trachtenberg's, got some juice in him.
Yep, you did that about 6 months beforehand.
Yeah, so we probably knew that he was doing that at the time. So it was oh hey, I'm reassured now that Prey might not suck. And hey, Prey didn't suck, so it all worked out.
Yeah.
I don't think it was as good as 10 Cloverfield Lane, admittedly, though. I think that's the better of the two if I'm comparing them, but that's...
Yeah. I mean, I've looked back on Trachtenberg's work. He obviously got his start with a Portal-based short film, and I think that's a lot more in his wheelhouse than what Prey was, but it feels like he's coming into his own on the Predator franchise of understanding what he needs to do with it.
All right, well, that is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been our discussion of Predator, Killer of Killers. Next week on the show, we don't have a show, but when we come back the week after that, we will be looking at one of the recent vote winners from Patreon, and that is Midnight Special. So yeah, it's the week off next week, and then we're pretty... Well, I can't say we're uninterrupted for a while, because some Tuesdays are going to be taken by Collector's Cut. But if you're watching these on YouTube, there's going to be something out on Tuesday every week for a good few months at this point.
Yes.
But yeah, Midnight Special's next on the show. So thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching Science Fiction and Computer Ad Salsa.